Hey there everybody and welcome back to the channel. I know, it's been a little bit and I show back up looking like some sort of rustic mountain wizard, but I assure you, I bought this at Bass Pro Shop. Today we're going to talk about the second half of the Code Geass anime. Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion, R2. R2 continues the story of the first season and began airing in April of 2008. Much like the actual year-long wait between seasons, the actual story skips ahead almost one full year. If you haven't seen my video on season 1, you should probably just go watch it. It is pretty long because Code Geass has a lot of moving parts and characters, and I expect that this video will be quite long as well. R2 picks up 1 year after the first season and deals with the direct fallout of the Black Rebellion. So without a lot of preamble this time, let's jump right into the story of Code Geass Season 2, because there are a lot of twists and turns that I'm still thinking about after finishing the story. Code Geass, Lelouch of the Rebellion R2 picks up after Lelouch v Britannia's failed rebellion. His followers, the Black Knights, are in hiding, with a lot of upper leadership like Todo imprisoned by the Britannian government. Lelouch is, kind of surprisingly, still alive. Surprisingly, because the last thing we saw in Season 1 was Lelouch and Suzaku facing off, and then a cut to black and gunshot. And also, Suzaku's basically superhuman, run faster than bullets and shit, so I don't think Lelouch beats him in a 1v1. However, Lelouch seems to have lost any memories of being the revolutionary called Zero, and has resumed his life as a simple student at Ashford Academy in Area 11, the Britannian territory formerly known as Japan. Lelouch has also lost any memory pertaining to his blind, wheelchair-bound sister Nunnally, who has been replaced with a newer, upgraded younger brother version 1.0, Rollo. And it isn't only Rollo who is new to Lelouch's cast of school friends, as the Imperial agent Valletta Nu is now his, gym teacher? And also, everyone just totally accepts Lelouch's new brother and acts like everything is totally normal, which makes the viewer begin to question what the fuck is really going on under the surface right from the beginning. While Lelouch's memories seem to have been overwritten, his other tendencies, like gambling, remain intact, and so he and his brother head to a place called the Babel Tower, a huge commercial complex on the outskirts of Britannia's Tokyo settlement. The tower doesn't just house a huge mall and multiple unfinished floors, but also a casino where Lelouch can show up haughty nobles by beating them in chess. A further consequence of Zero's failed rebellion is that the racism against 11s, the people of former Japan, is even worse than it was in Season 1, like re-education camp levels of collective punishment. We see guys like the Britannian mafia boss, Mr. King, threatening to buy an 11 like Colin, so the divide between Britannians and the people they forcefully occupy is even more obviously one-sided than it was before, and I wasn't even sure that was possible. Britannia's Office of Secret Intelligence is keeping an eye on Lelouch as he goes to the casino and refers to him as bait. I will say the start of this season does a good job making the audience ask questions like, why didn't they just kill Lelouch at the end of Season 1? But rest assured, Code Geass does actually answer all the questions posed in Season 1, however the answers do get more crazy as time goes on. Colin is working as a cocktail waitress at the casino because they need to give you some fan service right away. And after her little run-in with Mr. King, Lelouch challenges the mafioso to a chess match. Colin appears to be using this as a chance to get close to Lelouch to plant a bug or a tracker on him, and it's apparent that she is still one of the small number of people that know Lelouch was Zero. His identity didn't become common knowledge after Season 1. Babel Tower comes under attack by the remnants of the Black Knights and their de facto leader C2, the Immortal Witch. The reason that Britannia simply wiped Lelouch's memories instead of executing him was to draw C2 out, either to put an end to the Black Rebellion forever, or for other more clandestine reasons that only certain people in the Empire know about. Black Knight soldiers bust into the Babel Tower with nightmares and engage OSI mech squadrons as both sides attempt to capture Lelouch. Man, it's nice to feel wanted, huh? Lelouch and Rollo escape the pandemonium by running into part of the tower that's still under construction, but are separated by an explosion. Finally, Lelouch is found by C2, who is shot by the OSI, but kisses Lelouch and reminds him of their contract, breaking the seal on his memories. Lelouch commands the OSI soldiers to die, and they're driven to kill each other by the spell of his Geass, the power to make anyone listen to his commands. Lelouch says his very well-known line, "It wasn't me who was wrong, it was the world," and then takes back the mantle of Zero, renewing his pledge to remake the world. Elsewhere, we see Lelouch's oldest friend and most fierce enemy, Suzaku Kururugi, now the 7th Knight of the Round Table, ordered by Emperor Charles himself to kill Lelouch. I was glad to see that we are immediately shown a flashback to what happened at the end of Season 1 right as Episode 2 starts. Basically, Suzaku does his signature big spinning kick and then beats up Lelouch while Colin watches. She doesn't intervene because Zero, being Lelouch, freaks her out too much. Suzaku then drags the captured Lelouch to the Emperor and is made a Knight of the Round for his efforts. Charles then uses his own Geass, the power to rewrite someone's memories on Lelouch. This makes him forget everything about being Zero and also everything about his sister Nonali. Now that Lelouch has his memories back, he's able to take a nightmare from one of the Britannians, and he also finds one of the OSI guys' journals about him. He then uses his old tricks to direct the Black Knights throughout the battle, and as soon as they realize they're following Zero's orders once again, their morale goes through the roof. The improved morale doesn't stop Colin from pulling a gun on Lelouch and asking if he used his Geass on her. It's kind of a sore spot, but Lelouch assures her that her admiration for Zero was always her own. This puts Colin in this sort of weird position for the first half of R2 where she really dislikes Lelouch, but still admires what he's done as Zero, and she wrestles with those complicated feelings. Oh yeah, I'm just gonna mention it now, but there's a lot more fan service in R2 than Season 1, which is fine, but there are also some times in this season where some crazy shit will be happening and then the camera will be like right up Colin's ass, and I have to ask myself what I'm supposed to be feeling in that moment. Colin and Lelouch are almost stopped in their plans of setting up a bunch of bombs in the tower by an offshoot nightmare based on the Lancelot called the Vincent that appears to have the ability to teleport. Lelouch wonders how that could even be possible, but they detonate the bombs and collapse Babel Tower, achieving 2 objectives. The tower falls on Viceroy Caleris's command center, killing him, and the debris clears a path directly to the consulate of the Chinese Federation. The Chinese Federation consulate is technically on foreign land in Area 11, so if the Black Knights can hide out there, the Britannians cannot come after them without causing an international incident. And as for why the Britannians would care, they're currently like in a huge war with the EU that Suzaku is taking part in, and they're gearing up to go to war with like the Indian Federation and everything, so they don't want to start a new front with the Chinese Federation right at this moment. When the Britannians show up to apprehend Zero anyway, we're introduced to a new character in R2, Shin-Kei. Shin-Kei is a fiercely loyal agent of the Chinese Federation and Empress Tianzi, and in physical ability he's right up there with Suzaku. Shin-Kei is so loyal to the Chinese Empress that it leads him to butt heads with China's ruling class, the High Eunuchs, when they try to undermine her or treat her as nothing more than a figurehead. Yeah, R2 really begins to expand the world of Code Geass beyond Area 11 and Britannia. In Season 1, we did hear of the Chinese Federation, European Union, and even a bit about India, but in Season 2, the Black Rebellion begins to go multinational, and it's no longer just about Japan. So there's a lot about the different countries' ruling parties shoved into the dialogue, and it seems appropriate to reaffirm that Code Geass is one of those shows where you really need to pay attention to every bit of dialogue. You definitely don't want to be like scrolling on your phone while watching it. Zero announces the founding of the United States of Japan and his personal return from inside the consulate. Rollo is actually the one piloting the teleporting mecha, which we learn is due to the fact that he has a Geass power. Rollo is about to use his power to go get Zero when he gets a call from Lelouch back at Ashford Academy. Rollo, who is being used as an agent of the OSI to keep track of Lelouch, is confused at how Lelouch could be at school. This sows the seeds of doubt for Rollo that Lelouch has actually recovered his memories, and begins the opening arc of R2 where Lelouch is basically trapped at the school and evading the OSI by secretly using his Geass on people.
It's fine. The school stuff was never my favorite in season 1 either, but the added layer of hiding the fact that he's regained his memories makes it a bit more fun. Also, he usually just has C2 stand in for Zero like at the consulate, which further confuses the agents watching him. Lelouch very quickly figures out that the Emperor brainwashed all his friends with the Geass as well, which is why Shirley now has no recollection that he's Zero, and nobody seems to remember Nonnally. Lelouch figures out that if he blows his cover, they'll just use Nonnally as a hostage, so he begins his plan to discreetly gain freedom from the OSI agents and cameras. This is when we begin to get a look at Rollo's motivations as well. We know he's an agent for the OSI and reports directly to Valletta, and he's fully willing to kill another OSI agent who may have overheard them discussing Geass. He is someone who should be ready to take Lelouch's life at a moment's notice, and someone who should be able to remain detached from his target. But when Lelouch notices Rollo has a locket that he originally gave to Nonnally and tries to take it back, Rollo flips out and demands to keep it. This kid has some deep-set attachment issues that Lelouch freely begins to manipulate. Lelouch escapes the oversight of his handlers by going to the mall with his friend and pseudo-love interest Shirley. He has her cover for him in a clothing store, saying that their friends are following them, so he wants to go and prank them. And when he slips away, he calls in a bomb threat to the mall and is able to get away in the confusion. When Rollo shows up, still not sure if Lelouch has regained his memories, he's forced to reveal that he has a Geass to Lelouch, teleporting behind his fake big brother in a nothing personal kid moment. Lelouch, being the biggest smarty pants on the block, figures out that Rollo's Geass doesn't actually teleport him or stop time, it only changes the perception of time to those affected. He offers to draw out C2 if Rollo will let him live, knowing that C2 is the OSI's real objective, and Rollo accepts. Lelouch racks his brain over how to get past this situation, as Britannia is now threatening to execute all of the Black Knight prisoners in front of the Chinese consulate.
In even worse news, the Chinese Federation has appeared to turn on the Black Knights and are planning to hand them over under Jinkei's direction. Colin and C2 mention that Zero had Geassed the Consul General, which explains why the Federation were so willing to stick their necks out for a bunch of perceived terrorists. Either way, the Consul General's decision did not sit well with agents of the Federation like Jinkei, and so he has permission from back home to dispose of the High Eunuch. But he has an even further plan to exonerate the Chinese Federation in Britannia's eyes by allowing C2, Colin, and the rest of the Black Knights to escape, and then he'll just say that the Consul General died in the conflict.
Zero and Rollo show up just as Lord Guilford, the personal knight to the former Viceroy Cornelia, is about to execute Ogi and the others. Guilford accepts Zero's offer of finishing everything with a duel, which is a really dumb idea because it is, of course, a trap. Lelouch had Geassed a worker in preparation for the duel who releases the locks on the big execution platform, causing it to collapse, kind of like the Tokyo settlement in Season 1. This allows Colin and the others to swoop in and save the prisoners. Maybe Britannians should stop building giant platforms that seem really easy for Zero to sabotage? This is the first time we see Rollo lie for Lelouch, telling Valletta that he and his brother are at the theater, and then when the Vincent almost gets shot by a nightmare sniper in the confusion, Lelouch saves him while yelling about Rollo being his little brother. Of course, this is only to manipulate Rollo further, as we see everything, including the sniper almost killing Rollo, was all according to his plans. Zero returns to the newly freed Black Knights, some of which want an explanation as to why he abandoned them at the end of Season 1, but when Ogi and Toto both back him, the questions are swept away in favor of high morale and reunited comrades. Lelouch has to keep up appearances at Ashford Academy, but at least this is now made easier with Rollo's help. Lelouch is able to Geass a bunch of the teachers into overlooking any infractions he and Rollo incur, allowing him to essentially come and go much more freely, but of course we can't get further into the plot without the show taking a break with some weird school-focused episode. This time they're trying to use the school's hobby mech, the Ganymede, to build the world's largest pizza, and it seems kind of in poor taste to use that thing for a school function after Nina tried to kill everyone with it in Season 1. There's also a cafe run by the school swim club, which is an easy excuse for fan service, and I don't really think that outfit is appropriate for a school festival, Valletta, goddamn.
This episode brings Suzaku back into the fold at Ashford Academy as he returns to school to keep an eye on Lelouch, along with two other Knights of the Round, Gino and Anya. During the festival, Colin runs into Valletta, then tells Lelouch that she's seen that woman with Ogie before, which is probably not good. With this knowledge, Lelouch and Rollo hold Valletta at gunpoint in the OSI office and threaten to tell everyone about her connection to the Black Knights through Ogie, which would destroy her reputation and cause her to lose the title of Baron.
Later that night, on the roof of the school, Suzaku tries a gambit to see if Lelouch has regained his memories. He tells Lelouch that his goal as the 7th Knight of the Round Table is to ascend to the rank of the Knight of One. As the Knight of One, Suzaku would be able to choose an area to rule over, and he would choose Area 11, essentially turning it into a protectorate that resembles the old Japan. He says this would mean there's no need for someone like Zero, and Lelouch is like, yeah, I guess. I don't really know why you're telling me this. Suzaku then hands Lelouch a cell phone saying that the new Viceroy of Area 11 is on the line and wants to speak to him. And to Lelouch's shock, the voice on the other end of the phone is none other than his sister Nunnally. Luckily, Rollo appears and uses his Geass to freeze Suzaku's perception of time, allowing Lelouch to talk to her. He tells Nunnally that he will save her, but for the time being they must pretend they don't know each other, and then hands the phone back, pretending he doesn't know who the Viceroy is. This convinces Suzaku that Lelouch has not recovered his memories, and that the Zero currently at large must be someone else. Lelouch is pretty mad that Britannia is using Nunnally as a political pawn, but C2 isn't the least bit surprised. She tells Lelouch that V2, the immortal kid with long blonde hair from Season 1, is the one that gave Emperor Charles his Geass, and that their contract is to kill God. Wow, man, I mean, there were some rumblings about that back in Season 1, but it's kind of funny to just hear that spoken so plainly. Charles and V2 have known each other for a very long time, and we see that in Charles's youth he even referred to V2 as his big brother. As a reminder, the audience still doesn't know what Lelouch's contract is with C2. It's kind of funny that we know the villain's Geass contract, but not the protagonist's. Suzaku arrives at the Chinese consulate demanding Shin-Kei hand over the Black Knights, but is told that they just sorta disappeared. Which makes sense because right at that moment they launch an attack on the airship carrying the new Viceroy over the Pacific. Lelouch hopes to capture Nunnally before the public knows her identity as Viceroy, since that would make it way harder to save her from the Emperor. The Black Knights lack any sort of air combat vehicles, so they just tow ground nightmares up to the ships, and then they have to contend with both Gino and Anya from the Knights of the Round. But when Zero makes it to Nunnally's chamber, he learns that she actually asked to come back to Area 11 as the Viceroy so she could fulfill her late sister Euphemia's plan of creating the Special Administrative Zone of Japan, and she even asks for Zero's help.
With the ship taking a ton of damage, mostly because the general on board is a fucking moron who blows up his own engines, it's up to Colin to perform a mid-air glide unit dock and then go to save Zero. At the same time, Suzaku bursts in to save Nunnally, and it makes Lelouch super angry and upset to see his sister call out to the man who sold him to the Empire. However, once Lelouch thinks about it, he realizes that having Nunnally be protected by Suzaku is basically what he was trying to do in the first season, so he decides to just roll with it for now.
Lelouch falls into a deep depression, thinking that his mission as Zero is over, going as far as destroying the phone that he uses as Zero and wantonly using his Geass on random thugs and drug dealers. Colin finds Lelouch at his lowest, about to shoot up Refrain, the same drug that her own mother was addicted to. Lelouch tells Colin to console him and almost kisses her in this really low moment for him, and she slaps the fuck out of him. Colin gives Lelouch almost the same speech that he gave to Toto in Season 1. He is the one who brought Zero into the world, and now it's his responsibility to play that role. Lelouch thinks of the memories he has with his friends and realizes that the world that he wants to create is no longer just for his sister. Now it's a fight to make the world a better place for everyone. And just as the Black Knights are about to be taken down by Suzaku, who's been hunting their ship, Zero comes over the radio and orders everyone to stop fighting. and for the Black Knights to participate in Nonali's special administrative zone.
Not all of the Black Knights are happy to just go along with the new Viceroy's plan, and to be fair to them, the last time they did, it ended in a terrible massacre of a bunch of innocent civilians. So when Todo seems ready to perform a coup if this plan doesn't align with the Black Knights' best interests, I can't say I blame him. But so far, no 11s have signed up to participate in the special zone, which is sort of ruining Nonali's plan, and that's when Zero calls Suzaku, Gino, and Anya. I guess Lloyd and Cecile are there too. Zero offers to get 1 million participants for the special zone in return for letting him live. He suggests they just exile him, and they think that he's selling out his own organization to save his own hide.
But Zero wouldn't be Zero if he didn't have some grand plan, and when the time comes to open the special zone and announce Zero's exile, he poses Suzaku one question: what makes someone Japanese? Zero says that it's their heart, and that Zero isn't a person but a symbol. The Black Knights set off smoke bombs in the crowd, and when the haze dissipates, the Britannians are met with the sight of 1 million cloaked Zeros facing them. Now, as for how Lelouch had the ability to make 1 million masks and cloaks, it just sort of runs on the rule of cool here. You can see that not all of the Zero outfits are the same color or design, so I assume everyone made their own. Big props to their ingenuity, because if I had to make that Zero mask, it would look way shittier than that. The Chinese Federation has received Sayako, Lelouch and Nonali's former caretaker and now super cool secret agent, as an envoy, and have dispatched a giant ship made out of an iceberg to pick up everyone who wants to leave Area 11. This serves a bunch of purposes for Lelouch and the Black Knights. It is a symbol that they are still a legitimate threat and organization after the failure of the Black Rebellion. It serves to boost their ranks with volunteers from that population of 1 million, both for their military and to support industry at their new home. It's way harder for Britannia to peg the Black Knights as a terrorist organization when the population of the United States of Japan is that large and they're located in sovereign territory. And finally, it removes any sort of resistance element from Area 11, which means that Nonali won't be in as much danger and can't be used as a pawn for the Emperor as effectively. Luckily, the one responsible for what to do to the Zeros is Suzaku. He decides to let them flee in exile and does not take the advice of one of Nonali's advisors, Miss Lohmeyer, who wants Suzaku to massacre 1 million people because she's a psychopath.
The Black Knights use the iceberg ship to escape to a place called Horai Island, a man-made island that lies in the territory of the Chinese Federation, and we see that they are supplied with more nightmares by their allies in India. The connection to the Indian government makes Rakshata one of the most valuable members of the Black Knights, and that's before you take into account her genius engineering skills. The Black Knights also integrate Zero's old ride, the Nightmare Gawain, into the systems of their new flying capital ship, the Ikaruga. Or, as Todo puts it in the dub, the Ikaruga, which maybe that's how you say it, but I'm still thinking about that old the bullet hell game. So remember back in season 1 when the Avalon being a flying ship was actually like a pretty big deal? Well, now they have those all over the place, and I guess that's just the reality of wartime tech, huh?
Zero hears news through his contacts that the young Empress of the Federation, Zhang Lihao, aka Empress Tianzi, has been promised to first Prince Odysseus of Britannia as a bride. Zero and the others immediately fear that this power play by the Chinese Federation's ruling class, the High Eunuchs, will result in them being handed over to Britannia. And while we saw that Prince Odysseus isn't exactly an intellectual or strategic match for Lelouch, it still poses a problem if he can't promise security to everyone on Horai Island. Also, when I said that Empress Tianzi was a young empress, I mean, she's literally a child, and Odysseus is apparently cool with that, which harkens back to political marriages of European aristocracy, but is also gross, dude. It isn't just Zero and the Black Knights that oppose this coupling, but Jinkei as well. He sees it for what it is, a power play by the High Eunuchs to gain power by becoming Britannian nobles, even if it means selling out their home and culture. We see why Jinkei is so loyal to the Empress in a flashback where he was living as a thief and had his life spared by the Empress, which causes him to devote his life to protecting her. So he decides to do something to stop the wedding. This show's pace sometimes moves pretty fast with events, and the wedding reception comes very quickly. Tianzi became close friends with Kaguya Sumeragi while she hid out in the Chinese Federation between seasons, so this allows Zero to show up at the reception as her +1. Zero being at the reception becomes a huge point of drama, obviously, what with his brother Schneisel being there. Schneisel even brought along Lelouch's former classmate Nina as part of his entourage, and I haven't mentioned it yet, but yeah, after Nina tried to blow everyone up with a Sakuradite bomb in Season 1, Schneisel basically recruited her to work on a secretive project. But at the reception, she totally loses her mind at the sight of Zero and tries to kill him, only to be stopped by Suzaku and Colin. Schneisel exerts his power over the High Eunuchs by calling off their guards and then challenging Zero to a chess match to settle things, with the stakes being that Zero will remove his mask if he loses. However, Lelouch has never actually been able to beat his brother at chess, and so when Schneisel checkmates himself and says that he's learned exactly what kind of man Zero is, it rightfully freaks him out, especially because I'm pretty sure in chess you can't move yourself into check. That is an illegal move, so actually would have been a draw. Schneisel ends the game due to Nina's interruption and just warns Zero not to come to the wedding tomorrow.
Well, it wouldn't be Code Geass if Lelouch heeded warnings, though, and the wedding suffers not one, but two interruptions. First from Shinkei, who runs in with his sword drawn, determined to save the Empress from an arranged marriage that she truly doesn't want. And then Zero crashes the wedding, but not to help Shinkei like you might think, but to take the Empress hostage by holding a gun to her head. This is an incredibly bold play by Lelouch, and he has Todo and the other Black Knights backing him up and covering his escape. Todo is equipped with his brand new custom nightmare, the Zangetsu, which allows him to fight on par with the Suzaku and hold him off. At this point, the Black Knight's power has grown to a point where they can directly challenge Britannia's most advanced mechs. It has taken a season and a half getting to this point, but the Zangetsu, the Gurren, and Rolo's Vincent are all battlefield powerhouses, and even their low-level mecha are a match for Britannia's grunt suits. Now, the biggest advantage that Britannia has is numbers, which means that even though the Black Knight's core units are strong, they aren't going to hold out for long if someone like Schneisel uses their full force on them.
Zero makes it aboard the Ikaruga with Empress Tianzi, who is put at ease by the sight of Kaguya. Zero explains his plan for Tianzi for the United States of Japan and how they have the support of the Indian Federation, and then he just leaves her with Kaguya because he's tired of dealing with her. Unfortunately, Todo wasn't the only one with a new nightmare, as Jinkei reveals his Shenhu, a nightmare strong enough to overpower the Gurren. I guess that's kind of on Colin for taking the Gurren out half-charged. Rakshada even reveals that the Shenhu was made by her team, but they abandoned the prototype because no pilot could handle it. This results in Shinkei defeating Colin, but taking damage to his own body and being forced to retreat with her as his prisoner. Detard and Ogi argue about trying to save Colin, with Detard saying it's too risky and they should continue to meet up with the Indian military like they planned. Zero finally butts in, saying that the Indian military could betray them anyway, and orders all of his forces to attack in an effort to save his ace pilot. Unfortunately, Shinkei is not only a skilled warrior but also a great tactician, and he draws the Black Knights into a field that he floods, causing them to get stuck. This buys enough time for Schneisel and the Avalon to show up as reinforcements, and forces Zero to retreat to their nearby rally point, a Chinese historical site that he believes the High Eunuchs won't dare to attack. However, Zero underestimates just how much they're willing to sell out their own people, as the High Eunuchs start bombing the ancient mausoleum, not caring if the Empress dies. Obviously, this enrages Shinkei, who is loyal to Tianzi above everyone else, and he turns on them and engages Gino and the Britannians in battle.
During the battle, the Empress runs out onto the deck of the Ikaruga, causing the eunuchs to order everyone to open fire. Shinkei yells out for anyone to please save the Empress, which prompts Zero to respond with, "Your wish is granted," revealing his newly arrived nightmare, the Shinkiro. It's Lelouch is so dramatic, man. You gotta love him, really. This is one of my favorite Zero moments throughout both seasons. It's always fun to watch Lelouch be dramatic as possible. The Shinkiro has technology called an absolute defense field and a giant laser that just kind of blasts everyone pretty much easily.
Zero asks Shinkei what he would think of leading the country and reveals that he broadcast the conversation with the High Eunuchs, showing their willingness to kill the Child Empress, and now rebellion has broken out all across Chinese territory. The Ikaruga's forces clash with the Britannians, and we get a moment where C2 confronts the Knight of the Round Table Anya, getting a psychic vision when they touch before collapsing. C2 has continued to talk to an unseen person for the duration of the second season, and this is where that mystery begins to come to a head as we figure out that whoever she's been talking to somehow inhabits Anya's body. Schneizel realizes that the High Eunuchs have lost the support of the Chinese population and tells his forces to fall back and head for the homeland, leaving the betrayers to their grisly fate at Shinkei's hands. With Shinkei now an ally to Zero and the Black Knights, and Empress Tianzi currently both in Zero's debt and his possession, the Black Knights' inner circle discuss what they should do. Some suggest that they have Tianzi marry someone from a Japanese house to ensure a stronger alliance, but Kaguya completely rebukes that idea, saying that people should marry for love. For Zero, it takes a call to Shirley and asking her opinion for him to decide that the power of love is indeed powerful. Zero decides that they should not force Empress Tianzi to marry someone on their side, which is literally what the Britannians were just going to do. Instead, he tells her that she should be with who she wants out of her own decision, and that her future belongs only to her, securing a strong relationship between the United States of Japan and the Chinese Federation.
Of course, Lelouch isn't taking over the Chinese Federation from the shadows in order to deliver the people from the corrupt elite out of the kindness of his own heart. Lelouch tells C2 that the reason he took over China is because he's planning on taking over the Geass Order in an effort to surpass the Emperor. He hopes that the Order has left traces somewhere in the vast country, and now will be able to search for the ruins much like those on Kamine Island. Here we begin to learn a bit more about the Geass Order itself, how it was a religious entity at one time, though it now serves as sort of a hidden cult that serves the Emperor and V2's will. C2 also drops the fact that she was once the director of the Geass Order before V2 deposed her, and with the excursion to China over with, Lelouch heads back to Area 11 to find himself in a bit of hot water.
While the conflict in China was happening, there were quite a bit of shenanigans afoot. He had Sayako fill in as his disguised stand-in, and not only did she literally kiss Shirley to cover up a secret doorway into the OSI office, quick thinking there, by the way, she also set up dates with pretty much every girl in the school with Lelouch. Not only is he dealing with being wrapped into Millie's Cupid Day festivities, but Gino and Anya also show up to enroll as students at Ashford, so now he has 3 babysitters from the Knights of the Round watching his every move. Behind the scenes, we see that Jeremiah, the once proud Britannian, driven insane by Zero's meddling in the first season, has returned, and is going to be used by V2 to assassinate Zero. They go to General Bartley, the round, bald guy from the beginning of Season 1 who had C2 in the big capsule, and tell him that they need him to make modifications to Jeremiah. Bartley is in no place to refuse and even seems terrified to be talking to V2, which is understandable. Honestly, Bartley is one of the few characters who's known about Geass since the beginning, and he gets treated like absolute garbage. Also, on top of that, Cornelia is still somehow alive, and the former Viceroy has been hunting down the meaning of Geass. This leads her to track down General Bartley and to break into his facility. She threatens him and his men at gunpoint, but they literally tell her they don't even want to be there, and even Bartley says he's only here because the Emperor ordered him to be. They're currently installing a piece of equipment onto Jeremiah's body called a Geass Canceller that does pretty much exactly what it sounds like. At Ashford, Lelouch seems to make up with Shirley and finally admit that he has some feelings for her. She tells him that one day she will make him fall in love with her for real because love is true power. When Jeremiah arrives at the Tokyo settlement, he activates his Geass Canceller across the entire city in order to get rid of any brainwashed agents that Zero may have stationed there. Shirley is in range of the Canceller, and as a result, she regains all her memories of Season 1, including the knowledge that Lelouch is actually Zero.
When Jeremiah arrives at Ashford Academy, now knowing Lelouch is Zero, which I assume was just sort of told to him by V2 and the Geass Order, it is Sayako who initially confronts him. And while Sayako is a badass ninja maid, Jeremiah is a maniacal cyborg who isn't going to be taken down in hand-to-hand combat. Well, okay, maybe Suzaku could take on Jeremiah one-on-one, since Suzaku's pretty much superhuman anyway, but he's sort of a weird outlier for this series. Rollo steps in and freezes Jeremiah, but he just uses his Geass Canceller to render Rollo useless. Finally, Valletta appears, and she tells Jeremiah that Lelouch is currently at Ikebukuro Station in return for their lives. Jeremiah shows up at the station at literally the worst time, as Lelouch, Suzaku, and Shirley all happen to be there at the same time.
Shirley and Suzaku were meeting, with Shirley intending on asking Suzaku if he's working with Lelouch. Her returning memories are obviously bothering her too much to let things go. Lelouch just happens to show up and see them, having arrived at the station to check up on something called a Gefyun disturber. These Gefyun disturbers are essentially an EMP device that can shut down nightmare frames and any other tech that works on Sakuradite technology, and it was built by Rakshata. How Lelouch has a bunch of them built into a train in the Tokyo settlement isn't explained, so we just have to assume it was a creative use of Geass orders, which is something you just have to accept in this show, especially R2. Anyway, Shirley is kinda dumb and runs away from Lelouch and Suzaku when both show up at the same time and runs directly off a balcony, but then she sees how Lelouch is acting and decides he must be operating alone as Zero, and then runs off with Suzaku saying she needs to speak to him. She actually tells Suzaku that she's in love with Lelouch, has forgiven anything he's done, and tells Suzaku that he should consider doing the same. Now that Shirley's character arc is sort of complete, I'm sure nothing bad will ever happen to her. Lelouch receives a call from Rollo telling him that Jeremiah is back. He's heading to the station, and Geass won't work. Lelouch Geasses some security guys and has them shoot the assassin, but the guns don't do anything. What does work, though, is the Gefyun disturber, which powers down Jeremiah's Sakuradite-infused body when he gets too close. Helpless, Jeremiah asks Lelouch why he would betray the Empire and go rogue. Lelouch tells Jeremiah of his need for revenge on those who murdered his mother, Lady Marianne.
Jeremiah says his first assignment was protecting Lady Marianne, and that he both loved and respected her. Lelouch turns off the Gefyun disturber, and Jeremiah pledges his loyalty to Lelouch v Britannia, and by extension, Zero. He sees Lelouch's mission as something worthy of his loyalty, and believes that Lelouch is pretty much vindicated in everything he's done in his quest for revenge. You know, Jeremiah might be a crazy cyborg man, but having him on your side doesn't seem awful, so Lelouch doesn't really question it that much.
However, when Lelouch goes to leave the station after testing the new devices, he comes across Shirley, who is shockingly mortally wounded. Lelouch is left in the dark for now about the killer, though the audience knows that it was Rollo. Rollo kills Shirley, telling himself that he's doing it to protect Lelouch, but the flash of his precious locket and Shirley mentioning Nunnally right before his attack shed a light on the real reason he did this: jealousy and the fear of being alone. Remember I said Rollo had some real attachment issues? As Shirley dies in Lelouch's arms, she tells him that she fell in love with him again and again after losing her memories. She wanted to help him because she realized he was fighting alone. She even says that she loves Lelouch even though her father was killed indirectly by Zero's actions, and no matter how feverishly Lelouch commands Shirley to live through his Geass, she's too far gone and passes away in his arms. The death of one of his oldest friends causes Lelouch to come to a decision: to destroy the Geass Order. While Rollo admits to Lelouch that he killed Shirley, Lelouch ends up blaming the power of Geass overall for her death. Lelouch calls C2 and tells her that he's going to use his personal guard, Zero Squad, to destroy the Order, both as a way to inform her of his plans and also to test her loyalties. Lelouch brings up that he doesn't even know the terms of his contract with C2, and she still refuses to tell him. Lelouch then dons his mask and uses Jeremiah's line to V2 to call and troll him, which is pretty funny. V2 does offer to just let Zero go if he hands over C2, but Zero just declares war on him and the Order instead. When V2 tries to counter Zero's attack plans by relocating the Order, it's revealed that Zero actually built a replica room of his quarters at Ashford Academy, and he's actually already there. That's a classic Lelouch move.
Zero orders his men to cut down all of the scientists and test subjects with no quarter. He explains that they're researching immortality and nobody can be left alive. Nobody gets any sympathy here, though when some members of Zero Squad are ordered to kill child test subjects, they begin to question whether or not Zero has gone mad, which will have spiraling consequences down the line. And if the kids don't get out of this massacre, you better believe your ass that Bartley's not getting out of this scot-free. He gets cut down in a hail of gunfire. Some members of the Order beg C2 to save them, since she's the former director, but she shows them no mercy in her mission of cutting off their escape route. And of course there's a moment where Rollo finds a bunch of test subjects that recognize him and call him their big brother, and he just fucking crushes them with his nightmare.
When V2 tries to buy time for his team by going out in the Siegfried, the unit that Jeremiah used in Season 1, he's met by Zero and Jeremiah, as well as a contingent of Zero's men. Lelouch actually planned to use this fight as a way to not only destroy the Order, but also to kill Rollo, who he's been thinking of getting rid of since like Episode 2. He plans to detonate a bomb planted on Rollo's Vincent, but before he gets the chance to take out both Rollo and V2, V2's Siegfried is shot down from long range by an unseen shooter. We get to see that it's actually Cornelia who has stolen a nightmare in order to escape, and has decided she also wants to destroy Geass for being involved in the death of Euphemia in Season 1. Of course, V2 is immortal, just like C2, so he just scurries away from the wreckage and goes to the lowest level of the complex. There he meets up with Emperor Charles in a room containing a thought elevator. Charles is actually pretty pissed off at V2, saying that he lied about sending an assassin after Lelouch. To V2, the ends justify the means, since it proved that Lelouch had regained his memories and had broken Charles Geass. But being lied to is a pretty damn big no-no for the Emperor, and an infraction that will cost V2 more than he can imagine. When Lelouch arrives in the complex's basement, he finds no one, but is pulled through the glowing thought elevator door and arrives at the Emperor's location, the Sword of Akasha, which is literally a machine built for killing God. As for how that works, man, look, I don't know, it's kind of just vibes based. There might be supplemental material out there in the manga or OVAs that explain how the Sword of Akasha, the Sea's World, immortality codes, or even Geass as a whole work on a more specific level, but the anime just doesn't really care about that.
Lelouch, finally confronting his father, demands that the Emperor tell him what happened to his mother. Charles tells him just to use his Geass to force it out of him, because Charles is kind of a catty, sarcastic bitch, which I do love about him. Lelouch knows that if he looks into his father's eyes, he could be Geassed again and have his memories overwritten, so he pulls a Lelouch and breaks some glass with his nightmare. This allows him to use his Geass on Charles through the reflection, but instead of finding out information about Lady Marianne, he just orders the Emperor to take his own life. Charles shoots himself, but as Lelouch stands there triumphantly over his body, he opens his eyes back up and reveals that he's immortal. Lelouch freaks out and shoots Charles a whole bunch, but nothing works. Charles Z. Britannia has stolen V2's immortality code and has become unkillable.
Remember when Charles confronted V2 about lying to him? Yeah, the dude was so pissed that he ripped the immortality right out of his big brother's body, somehow. That's one of those things that we don't really get to see. We do learn that the way to pass on an immortality code is through the fulfillment of a contract, but the Emperor takes what he wants, I guess. He attempts to break Lelouch's mind, transforming the landscape of the Sea's World into a twisting visage of masks and gears. He confronts Lelouch with the fact that he has spent so long lying and so long wearing masks that he's afraid to show anyone his true self. C2 then appears, saying that she always exists within this realm and she can enter it at any time. She finally reveals to Lelouch what the terms of her contract are. She wants to die. As it turns out, the final stage of Geass evolution is to take the place of the one who gave them the power. So C2's goal from the beginning has always been to get Lelouch to take her place as an immortal. C2 says there's no life without death. While being unkillable seems like it might be a great time, C2's backstory reveals why she's kinda just done with it all. C2 tells Lelouch that he's too kind to fulfill her contract and begins to leave, and that's when Lelouch begins to see her memories.
we see her as a starving child a long time in the past, making a contract with a lady in a church. C2's original Geass power was to make others love her unconditionally. Eventually, she forgot what the feeling of love was actually like, because it just lost all meaning to her. Eventually, C2 is told by the sister in the church that she's just being used to end the sister's life, paralleling how C2 is using the Lelouch now. Lelouch is able to snap out of the illusion and realizes that it was caused by the thought elevator, which interferes with people's thoughts. Charles and C2 embrace and begin to glow, and it looks like C2 is going to help him power up the Sword of Akasha.
She wonders why she didn't just force Lelouch to take the immortality code and realizes that it's because she pities him. Lelouch says that C2 should die smiling, not looking like she is now with Charles, and this causes her to pull away from the Emperor. There's a lot going on between C2 and Lelouch here, and my own theory has always been that C2 does develop feelings for him over the course of both seasons. There are some moments where they specifically highlight how happy C2 seems to be when she's plotting with Zero, so it seems to me that Lelouch is the one person who's been able to make C2 feel love again, which is a pretty good reason to stop having a glowing hug with his genocidal dad. This frees Lelouch's nightmare, which starts shooting everywhere, damaging the thought elevator, which expels Lelouch and C2 from the C's world. This traps the Emperor inside, or at least Lelouch assumes so, but the other side effect is that C2 appears to have lost all her memories and reverted back to her younger self before she received a Geass. This essentially makes her useless to Lelouch's further plans, but it also means that Lelouch loses his closest confidant. C2 has always been the person that Lelouch relies on for important jobs and reaches out to when things are going wrong. And it's just one more thing that's been taken away from him in his quest to change the world. While the attack on the Geass Order was successful and the soldiers involved were sworn to secrecy, there are some that start to crack because they were forced to kill unarmed kids and scientists.
Losing C2 doesn't slow Lelouch down though, because he, as Zero, reveals to the world his plan to rival Britannia, the United Federation of Nations. Behind the scenes, Detard has been handling relations with a ton of other countries outside of Imperial control, and Zero has been able to wrangle all of them together in a UN-style group. At the UFN ratification ceremony, we learn that the member states all have to disband their own military, and that the defense of the UFN has been tasked to the Black Knights. This means that the Black Knights will receive money, resources, and personnel from all member states.
This really does make them a fairly large threat to Britannia. At this point, they are the second largest military force on the planet. Zero announces that the first action the Black Knights will undertake is to liberate Japan. But to the surprise of Zero, Emperor Charles hacks into the screen and just declares all-out war on the UFN. Man, he cannot keep this guy contained. While Lelouch was off performing his attack on the Order, Schneisel was completing a scheme of his own. As I mentioned before, Lelouch's former classmate Nina was one of the only people not to return to Ashford. Instead, she was recruited by Schneisel to iterate on her Sakuradite bomb from Season 1's finale. Nina has been working on a new version of the bomb since before Season 2 even started, and the new weapon, officially named the Fleha Warhead, has been completed. Along with that, more members of the Knights of the Round Table have gathered to plan with Schneisel. This includes the Knight of 10, Bradley, who's a huge dick that throws knives at Suzaku for fun, and also Bismarck, the Knight of 1, who is entirely loyal to the Emperor and also pretty cool. Also, the whole time Lelouch was dealing with the Order, we get to see Suzaku play good cop, bad cop with himself against Colin. There's even a point where Suzaku almost uses the refrain drug on Colin, even knowing that her mother was addicted to it. It is probably the most fucked up thing that Suzaku does in the series, and I'm glad he stops before going through with it. He realizes in his mind that it's something that he believes Zero would do, and then Colin beats the shit out of him too.
Lelouch returns to his quarters after the ratification, racking his brain on how to beat Charles. The mind-wiped C2 brings him food and he fucking flips out and slaps it out of her hand, and then remembers that she has the personality of an abandoned slave girl and immediately feels bad about it. He asks C2 what she does when she hurts on the inside, emotionally, and C2 tells him that he should talk to a friend. Lelouch finally calls Suzaku and just straight up admits that he's Zero, but begs Suzaku to save Nonali. Lelouch still fears that the Emperor is going to use her against him, and Suzaku agrees, but only if Lelouch comes to the Kururugi Shrine alone. Lelouch arrives while the Black Knights begin their attack on Tokyo, which does stoke a bunch of tensions within his ranks. I mean, a lot of the original Black Knights still remember the last time that Zero went missing during a pivotal battle.
Lelouch admits that he used his Geass on Euphemia and takes responsibility for the deaths of both her and Shirley. He literally gets on his knees and begs Suzaku to save Nanali, and Suzaku asks if he really thinks that anyone would forgive him. Lelouch never brings up the fact that his Geass was malfunctioning either, choosing to accept the responsibility for his actions, even if he didn't intend to do it. Lelouch comes off as both incredibly pathetic in this moment, and also wholly dedicated to his cause, not caring about the personal ramifications as long as Nanali is protected. Suzaku explains how using the Geass to make him live has perverted his own sense of morals, and I can really see why he would hate the power of Geass at this point. In the end, Suzaku does agree to help Lelouch, but only if Lelouch lives up to the lie that is Zero. If he endeavors to end the war, then Suzaku will help, but then a bunch of OSI guys storm the shrine and take Lelouch prisoner, causing him to believe that Suzaku has betrayed him. Of course, Suzaku knew nothing about this, and these agents arrested Lelouch on Schneisel's orders. Schneisel talks to Lelouch and tells him that he's willing to intercede on Lelouch's behalf and talk to the Emperor. To Schneisel's credit, he's the only one on the board here who doesn't have the power of Geass to toy around with, so getting Lelouch to join forces is a pretty solid idea. But of course, Lelouch has a contingency plan for this exact scenario. Earlier, we see some scenes where Jeremiah contacts Lord Guilford, the former personal knight of Princess Cornelia. The audience might think that Jeremiah is a double agent, but really it was Lelouch using Jeremiah to meet Guilford in order to Geass him. He gives the knight the order to see Lelouch/Zero as if he were Cornelia, so when Lelouch strikes a certain pose while being detained, the Geass order activates and Guilford attacks, letting Lelouch go free.
This leads to Zero rejoining the Second Battle of Tokyo to bolster his forces. Meanwhile, Suzaku also joins the battle in the Lancelot, but his Nightmare has been equipped with the newly developed Fleha Bomb, which Nina is incredibly enthusiastic to use, by the way. Luckily, Suzaku sees the bomb as an absolute last resort and swears to defeat Zero without using it. And of course, you also have the lair of Schneisel using Nanali's presence as a deterrent to Zero. During the battle, Sayako and Rollo infiltrate the government building with two objectives. Sayako finds Callan's cell and finally frees her, giving her a pilot suit and taking her to the newly improved Gurren Satan in the hangar. Rollo, on the other hand, believes he's the only family that Lelouch really needs, and so his plan is to find Nanali and kill her.
The battle over Tokyo rages as pretty much every major character gets some time to shine. It's nice to see Colin back in action again, especially because the upgraded Gurren absolutely starts wrecking shit. Callan eventually makes her way through to the Lancelot and has a showdown with Suzaku, who would rather die than fire the Fleha, no matter how much Nina screams at him to blow everyone up. But just as Suzaku accepts his death on the battlefield, his Geass order activates and forces him to fire the bomb in order to live. And here's where I do understand Suzaku and not hate him as much. I mean, imagine your autonomy being taken away by someone you thought was your best friend and being forced to take actions against your own sense of morality. The Fleha warhead is deployed and detonates at the heart of the Tokyo settlement. Sayako and Nanali appear to be caught in the blast, like we see them get overtaken by the flash of light. Remember that one for later. Lelouch understandably freaks out, but is saved from rushing towards the explosion by the Geass Guilford. The Second Battle of Tokyo comes to a close, with 10 million people dying in the explosion, and Todo overriding Zero's orders to search for Viceroy Nanali and turning into a full retreat. We get a scene with Nina being mentally scarred by all the people she killed with her invention, but yeah, this does not make me like her anymore. It's not like you were tricked, you psycho bitch. You specifically built a huge fucking bomb and yelled at Suzaku multiple times to fire it. Surprise, surprise, you have the deaths of millions on your hands, and you find out it doesn't feel great, huh?
Lelouch, still flipping out internally, finds Rollo in his quarters, and upon seeing that Rollo still has Nanali's locket, absolutely tears into his fake brother. Lelouch tells Rollo that he hates him and that he's literally been trying to kill him since they met, but things just kind of keep getting in the way. Hey man, this is probably the most honest Lelouch is in the entire series up until this point. Honestly, Rollo should probably count himself lucky that Lelouch didn't just stab his ass right there. While Zero's out of commission, Todo has to decide what the Black Knights should do when Prince Schneisel shows up in person on board the Ikaruga. Schneisel arrives, saying he's simply a diplomat attempting to parley with Zero, but Todo makes the decision for the Black Knights Inner Council to meet him without their figurehead. At this point, Todo has received the information that's traveled up the ranks about Zero having his squad eliminate children, and the opinion of Zero as a leader is beginning to change within the Inner Circle.
Schneisel plays his most important card here and just tells them Zero's true identity as Lelouch v Britannia, though Detard counters and says Zero's identity has never really mattered, only the fact that he can perform miracles. However, Schneisel spills the beans about the Geass and tells them that Zero can only pull off all these feats because of it. Cornelia tells them that it is Lelouch who caused Yuffie to massacre all those 11s in Season 1, and shows them a recording of Lelouch's conversation with Suzaku where he admits it. On top of that, they have a binder full of dossiers on people that Lelouch has Geassed. Ogi, as the deputy director of the Black Knights, agrees to hand over Zero if they regain control of Japan. Zero's called to the hangar where the Black Knights confront him and reveal their betrayal. Callan tries to stand up for him, but Lelouch realizes his time as Zero has come to a close and unmasks himself. He plays the part of the villain they believe him to be, saying that they're all pawns to his scheme, but Colin hears him tell her that she needs to live under his breath, which is a point that I really like, as I think they did a really good job growing Colin into one of Zero's most trusted agents. As the Black Knights open fire on their former leader, one of the Nightmares jumps into the fray and blocks the bullets. Rollo, despite being told by Lelouch that he hates the shit out of him, decides to save Lelouch at the cost of his own life. He spirits his brother away by using his Geass across a huge area for so long that he basically goes into cardiac arrest. He tells Lelouch that while the memories they made together were fake, they made him feel human. As Rollo dies in the cockpit, Lelouch tells him a final lie and says that he doesn't hate him.
Lelouch is left overlooking a forest landscape, and after all that's happened, he is resolved to kill the Emperor, even if it costs him his own life. Locking him inside the Sea's world apparently does not work, so Lelouch is left to find out how you permanently take out someone who's immortal, and with all his allies gone, he has to do it himself. With a ceasefire being declared between Schneisel's forces and the Black Knights, the prince himself decides it's time to perform his coup. Schneisel does have some of the Knights of the Round on his side, and says that Charles cares nothing for diplomacy or war, or doesn't even give a shit about ruling Britannia anymore. Suzaku finally makes his bid to become the Knight of One, and asks Schneisel to bestow the title upon him if he assassinates the Emperor. Suzaku says that the methods really don't matter, only the results. Wow, what a 180 for that guy.
Suzaku takes a squad to go and kill the Emperor, who arrived on Kamine Island during the Battle of Tokyo. When he confronts Charles and tells him that he has committed the crime of using Geass, he's stopped by none other than the current Knight of One, Bismarck. Bismarck is so badass, by the way, that even though Suzaku wants to fight him, his Geass order to live makes him run away. But then there is a big explosion and Lelouch walks into Orifarm. He apparently Geassed a bunch of soldiers on one of the ships and then has them fire on Bismarck's men. Schneisel's coup begins in full as the battle erupts, and in the confusion, Lelouch makes it to the thought elevator inside the ruins right behind Emperor Charles. As they enter the Sword of Akasha once again, Lelouch tells Charles it isn't God he has to deal with, but him, and then he blows up the entrance, sealing them both inside for eternity. During the battle, Suzaku is knocked out when a stray shot blows up the ground from underneath him. He wakes up to find himself face to face with C2 and Anya, who appears to be under the influence of a Geass. Anya explains that she is actually Lelouch's mother, Lady Marianne, who used her Geass on Anya to hide her consciousness within the girl's body. C2 has known this entire time, and the person she has randomly been speaking to telepathically through the Sea's world is Marianne. C2 appears to be back to her old self as the contact with Marianne repaired her mind, and she's left wondering if she wants to help Lelouch or activate the Sword of Akasha with Charles. This is how bad C2 wants to end her immortality, They explain what is happening to Suzaku, and we're told that the Seas world is the collective unconsciousness of all humankind, a thing that some would call God.
Inside the Sword of Akasha, Lelouch finally confronts Charles about his mother's death, and gets the answer he spent the entire series looking for. When Charles was young, the world was filled with even more conflict than it is now, with members of the royal family warring with and assassinating each other. Charles and V2 vowed to fix the world and make it a place where people cannot wear masks or lie to one another. A world they believe would bring ultimate peace. As time went on, Charles met Marianne, and she actually shared his vision for the new world. V2 became jealous and killed her, and then lied about it to Charles. This causes Charles to begin to scheme on his own to complete his plan, the Ragnarok Connection, which requires 2 immortality codes to resonate all the ruins across the world and power the Sword of Akasha to kill God. Simple plan, really. Charles sent Lelouch and Nunnally to Japan to keep them safe.
C2 learned what happened to Marianne through communicating with her in the Seas world, and became disillusioned with Charles's vision. She left her position as the director of the Geass Order, which was then taken over by V2. Charles then reveals that pretty much everything that caused the Black Rebellion was put into motion by him, all to draw out C2 to either force her to go along with the plan or pass on her immortality code to Lelouch. Also, as one extra little tidbit of info, Charles used his Geass to implant false memories into Nunnally regarding her mother's death, but as an unintended side effect of the Geass, she was blinded and crippled. Despite the door being destroyed, C2 possesses the ability to send people into the Seas world. She first sends Marianne, which shocks Lelouch, and she has to promise to him that she isn't an illusion or a trick. C2 and Suzaku follow through into the other realms soon after so that Suzaku can snoop on the family drama from afar. Reuniting with Marianne wasn't exactly the warm family reconciliation that you might think, as Lelouch learns that his mother is totally in on the Emperor's plan of destroying God. With C2 there now, they can start the Ragnarok Connection. The Sword of Akasha begins to resonate, and we see the outside world shaking as a result. Marianne claims that the sword is now slaying God, and Lelouch exclaims that forcing good intentions on people is still an evil act, which is pretty ironic coming from him. Lelouch realizes that he can use his Geass power on God because it's made up of people's consciousnesses, so he commands it to not create a stagnant world where nothing can change and to resist the stop of the flow of time. You know, it's kind of an ass-pull idea, but the idea works. Charles and Marianne begin to fade away as they're absorbed into the Seas world itself. Lelouch says he realized that both his father and mother were content with throwing their own children to the wind so long as they could continue their plans. C2 sorta comes to her senses here, and as such isn't also absorbed along with them. And then Charles and Marianne are just like completely fucking obliterated. It's pretty nuts.
The episode then abruptly jumps ahead 1 month, where we learn that no one in the Britannian Council has seen or heard from Emperor Charles, Bismarck, or Schneisel. Lelouch just sort of strolls into the assembly and announces that he murdered his father, and that makes him the Emperor now. At first everyone just thinks he's kidding around and welcomes him back, especially Odysseus, who has just been kind of a big idiot the entire show. But when it becomes apparent that Lelouch is not joking, they try to grab him, causing Suzaku to jump down from the rafters and take out the guards. Lelouch, as Emperor, has named Suzaku a Knight of the Round Table above all others, the Knight of Zero. Lelouch then uses his mastered Geass that now takes both his eyes, and forces everyone there in the royal family to acknowledge him as the true Emperor.
Lelouch immediately abolishes the aristocracy and goes about putting down any factions that could oppose him. We see him Geass rooms full of people to be slave soldiers, and his most important enforcers are Suzaku and Jeremiah. While the heel turn is set up to be shocking, the show doesn't really let you wallow in that feeling for very long before revealing that this is all part of a plan that Lelouch calls Zero Requiem. The audience doesn't know the details, but we do know that Lelouch believes Britannia must control the world for it to work. C2 and Suzaku are both completely in on the plan, along with Jeremiah and a few other close people that know the details. Strangely enough, Lloyd and Cecile stick with Lelouch during the final arc, mostly because they trust Suzaku and know the details of Zero Requiem. Also, you have Nina, who is working on a special project for Lelouch to try and redeem herself for making the Fleha. which is a big step forward for her because, this is the first time that she can even look at Lelouch knowing he's Zero and not fly into a murderous rage. So, good for her for that character development. It only took the deaths of tens of millions of people to get there. Bismarck leads the remnants of the Knights of the Round in an attack on Lelouch, but Suzaku stops them with the new Lancelot Albion. Suzaku finally stands toe-to-toe with Bismarck, and we see that Bismarck's eye patch rips off, and of course he has a Geass power. His ability allows him to see a few seconds into the future, which he says he hasn't used since he battled with Lady Marianne, which is just kind of like a nice little piece of world building. Suzaku's Geass order is now powerful enough that it interferes with Bismarck's Geass, and Suzaku is able to cut him in half on TV in front of the entire world. I like to think that when Lelouch's Geass evolved so that he had the Geass symbol in both eyes, it also made his orders even more powerful, which gave Suzaku the ability to fight on an even footing with Bismarck. Lelouch uses this broadcast as a huge display of power and announces that Britannia will be joining the UFN. The member states of the United Federations of Nations realize that Lelouch would hold over half the voting power because of Britannia's population, so they tell him in order to join, he has to break up the Empire or limit his voting power.
Well, Lelouch is not going to do that and is totally committed to playing the global villain at this point, so he just has Suzaku smash through the ceiling in his Lancelot. Britannian soldiers move in, taking the entire leading body of the UFN hostage. Man, Zero disappears for 1 month and the Black Knights make decisions like putting every nation's leader in a single room at one time? Let the enemy approach with heavy weaponry? Lelouch plans on forcing the UFN to let him join under duress, but gets a call on the comms unit from none other than Schneisel, who announces that he has used a Fleha warhead to destroy the imperial capital of Pendragon.
I feel like the revelation that Schneisel blew up the Britannian capital city gets glossed over pretty quick, but I guess Emperor Lelouch has bigger things to worry about, like Schneisel's floating fortress called Damocles that is bristling with Flehas. If you're wondering where he got it, the answer is he had it built by a company in Cambodia, which, again, it's just something you kind of have to ignore. If anyone has the resources to build a superweapon in secret, I guess it is Schneisel. So Schneisel's plan is to take the Damocles weapons platform into low orbit in order to bomb every non-Britannian nation with Flehas to kill billions of people. He says that people only think that they want freedom, but what they really want is peace brought through power and fear. In a shocking twist, Schneisel reveals to Lelouch that Nunnally is still alive and under his care, and in fact she has the key that fires the bombs. So Lelouch can't just blow up Damocles without killing her. Lelouch realizes he has to stop Damocles even if it puts his sister at risk, and we get a montage of everyone preparing for the operation against the weapon. The Black Knights offer to help Schneisel destroy Lelouch, and we see UFN forces clash against Lelouch's Britannia in worldwide skirmishes. Lelouch heads to Japan with his main forces to fight Schneisel in a battle over Mount Fuji. Before hostilities kick off, he calls his brother and shows that he has all of the UFN leadership held aboard his flagship, the Avalon. Jinkei, the commander of the Black Knight forces, tells Schneisel they can't use the Flehas because of this, and so Schneisel sends in the Black Knights to punch through Lelouch's defenses. While this seems to work pretty well at first, with the Britannians pulling back, it is of course all according to Lelouch's plans. He draws the bulk of the enemy forces over the summit of Mount Fuji, and then detonates a bomb he had planted deep in the Sakuradite mines. This causes a massive explosion that takes out Black Knight and Britannian forces alike.
This huge explosion opens Damocles to attack, so Schneisel orders Nunnally to fire the Fleha at Lelouch. Luckily for our new emperor, his Geassed slave nightmare pilots will literally jump in front of the bombs to save him, intercepting them before they can reach the emperor. It isn't the most elegant solution, but it works while Nina is working on a countermeasure to the bombs. They have the ballsy plan of directly attacking the Damocles with the Avalon, even though the hostages are on board, but it's not like Schneisel even cares about them anyway. When Nina finishes the countermeasure, Lelouch personally boards the Nightmare Shinkiro, and he basically has to input this program into a device while the Fleha is being fired at him with an incredibly small window of time. Luckily, Nina finishes the countermeasure, and hey, while I think Nina is sort of an annoying character, and I don't think a lot of the writing choices around her are the best, At least she has a really cool design for the second half of the show. I do like how the countermeasure just sort of implodes the Fleha explosion, and it also doesn't solve the problem that Damocles poses because you would have to individually counteract each bomb with extreme precision. That's a cool writing choice that allows the characters to survive a single Fleha without lowering the stakes. Lelouch is able to use the Shinkiro to hold open the shields long enough for Suzaku himself and a few other soldiers to get inside. Inside, the group is forced to split up when Gino attacks them, and Suzaku stays behind to fend him off. Too bad the Shinkiro is critically wounded in the exchange, so Lelouch has to hoof it on foot. The show gives us one more example of Schneisel's cruel scheming mentality when he directly tells Detard that if they can kill Zero, then any company on the planet will be willing to build them more Flehas. He says he doesn't give two shits about Nunnally's opinion, and if she's a problem, he'll just kill her. Of course, Lelouch knew that Schneisel would try to run as soon as the flying fortress was boarded, so when his brother makes it to the escape shuttle, he's met with Lelouch on a screen essentially making fun of his entire plan. But guess what? That was just a recording, and Lelouch shows up right behind Schneisel to Geass him, ordering him to serve Zero. Man, that is Lelouch's favorite trick, isn't it? I think he uses recorded voice in video clips like 6 times over the course of the series. Detard pulls a gun but is shot by Schneisel, and when Detard realizes he's going to bleed out on that shuttle floor, he asks Lelouch to at least kill him using the power of Geass. This part of Detard's characterization is actually really interesting to me. He's become so obsessed with the story of Lelouch's rise to power and the Geass that he would rather die from its power. Lelouch tells Detard that he's just not worth using the Geass on and leaves him to die on the floor, which is pretty fucking cold, man. Meanwhile, outside, Callan encounters Suzaku right after his battle with Gino. The two fight to a stalemate in the most impressive 1v1 in the entire series. While Suzaku is able to take out the Gurren's power supply, he is impaled and the Lancelot explodes, supposedly killing Lelouch's oldest friend. We also get this scene where Jeremiah fights Anya and ejects out of his exploding nightmare to threaten her with a sword in midair. It's the most ridiculously awesome thing in Season 2, and ends with Jeremiah realizing that Anya had her memories wiped and using his Geass canceller on her. With his main enemy taken care of, Lelouch ascends the Damocles base and finally comes face to face with the one person he actually tried to protect the entire time, Nunnally. Surprisingly, Nunnally has actually gotten her sight back after having to scramble around on the floor for the Fleha key. Her own willpower is enough to break the side effects of the Emperor's Geass. Lelouch and Nunnally have a philosophical argument. Nunnally says that Lelouch's use of Geass goes against human dignity and forces people to act in ways against their own beliefs, but Lelouch counters by saying that the threat of Damocles would do the exact same thing. When Nunnally says that everyone's hatred will be focused on Damocles so that everybody can move on from old hostilities, it makes Lelouch realize that they actually have the same goal. So he does what he needs to do, and Geass his own sister to force her to give him the Damocles key. When Nunnally snaps out of the Geass, she chases after her brother but is stopped by the only thing more powerful than the Geass or Fleha bombs: stairs. She yells after her brother, calling him an evil, cowardly demon, but Lelouch knows that his ultimate plan of Zero Requiem cannot be stopped. The battle for Damocles comes to an end as both sides see a Fleha warhead detonate directly overhead. Emperor Lelouch makes an announcement to the entire world that Schneisel has surrendered to him. The Black Knights are defeated and no one exists with the power to challenge him. The show then jumps ahead to more months to the new imperial capital of Japan. Lelouch is having everyone who opposed him transported to their execution. We see that literally everybody hates Lelouch and his violent regime, saying that voicing any form of dissent can just get your entire family killed. Lelouch has all our favorite characters chained up as he stands above them during the parade route, even having his own sister paraded around in bonds. As the parade goes on, Zero appears on the road ahead of them, mirroring his first appearance in the series. Jeremiah goes off to stop him, but this Zero is far more physically capable than before and just gets right past him, though Jeremiah is in on what's happening and wishes Zero onward. Zero reaches Lelouch's platform, and we see a flashback of Lelouch giving Suzaku Zero's mask. Lelouch tells Suzaku that once the world's hatred is focused on him, to kill him. This will complete the Zero Requiem plan and will destroy the world's hatred and begin a new age of cooperation. Zero stabs Lelouch in the stomach with his big sword, and Lelouch tells him that his punishment is to live on as the masked Knight of Justice forever and to sacrifice having a normal life. Nunnally realizes that this was Lelouch's plan all along as his nearly lifeless body slides down and comes to a stop right beside her. The world just sort of blames everything evil on Lelouch, and I guess I can't really blame people for wanting a scapegoat at this point, really. Damocles flies into the sun, and Nunnally is now the Empress of a benevolent Britannia with Zero at her side. Callan is shown living with her mother, finally reaching the dream that she wanted to create for herself the entire series. And finally, C2 is shown making her way down a road in a wagon, much like she would have long ago. But instead of being melancholy about once again being a lone immortal, we see that C2 is able to communicate with Lelouch, as he's become part of the collective unconsciousness that he saved from obliteration.
And that is the end of Code Geass Lelouch of the Rebellion R2. Of course, the series has continued on past this point with multiple projects and compilation movies, but taken as a 2-season television run, Code Geass is just really damn interesting. I'm not going to pretend that it's the most flawlessly written anime I've ever seen, especially when a lot of the events in the latter half rely on Lelouch Geassing a fuck ton of people off screen, but the most important thing to me with this show is that it was relentlessly entertaining. As someone who did go into it knowing the twist at the end beforehand because Code Geass is incredibly popular, but didn't know how the journey got to that ending, I found the show to be very hard to put down. It has a really easy time drawing the viewer in with its ridiculous drama and near constant cliffhangers. Obviously, this series has so much going on in any given episode that I had to leave some things out. A lot of episodes have A, B, and C plots going on, and in a show where every piece of dialogue is pretty important to the plot or lore, while I will watch the OVAs at some point in the future, it's gonna be a while before I make a video on them because just the density of things that happen in the plot of this show makes for some really long videos. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching. If you made it this far, then you've heard me yap about both seasons for over 2 hours, so I'll see you next time.